Hello and welcome to the Parousia Podcast. I'm Charbel, your host, Director at Parousia, and I'd like to welcome all the viewers from around the world, especially those watching on EWTN as well. As you know, we've been collaborating with EWTN Asia Pacific with the My Encounter series, and I'm with a very special guest, and I'd like to call a good friend over the last 19 years now, Cardinal George Pell, and we are here now in his house. And what a privilege it is. Hello, Cardinal Pell. Your Eminence.
Charbel, yes, very happy and honoured to be called a good friend.
Yes, absolutely. I do remember when you first came to Sydney, we were talking earlier, it was 2001, and I formed with a couple of other fellow Maronites. We were like security guards because there was a few protesters at the time. But it was a great celebration to have you when you first arrived.
It was a bit noisy, a little bit. There weren't many protesters.
No, that's
20,
right.
30, but they were determined and well organised and got good coverage.
No, that's right. Well, you and I guess over the years and throughout your life, you have been known across the media, and you create a splash, and you're making the headlines. And those who don't know you personally, I guess they don't get to see the human side of you. They see the headlines. They see one or two statements that are taken out of context, and so. Unfortunately, the majority of the population just get that, and I'd like today, in this opportunity, to share a little about yourself, your upbringing, your faith journey, and maybe give people a bit of an insight of that and get back to the basics again.
Very good, yeah, good. And I mean, if you're regularly in the public view defending Christian values, and that's it's not surprising that it's not always a bundle of laughs.
No, that's right. That's right. It's the Christian message isn't always well received from our our secular culture these days. But
no, there's a very determined opposition to a lot of the Christian values.
Yeah, I really want to get into a bit of that a bit later on. But can we start from the very beginning? Are you a cradle Catholic?
I'm a cradle Catholic. Yes. My mother was an Irish Australian. Burke was her name. My father wasn't a Catholic. He was baptised an Anglican. So I grew up in what was called then, probably still is, a mixed marriage.
Yes.
But it wasn't quite as common then, at least in our world in Ballarat and Victoria, as it is now.
Did you find yourself going to both churches, the Anglican church?
No. Dad was a non-practising Anglican.
Okay. So you brought up as a normal Catholic, going to get the sacraments?
Brought up as a strong Catholic.
Yeah, fantastic.
My mother was strongly Catholic. She came from a religious family. She had a first cousin, a Dominican priest.
Oh, wow.
I had a first cousin who was a priest, and his sister was a Josephite nun. So the Burke side of the family were pretty well all practising the faith in those days.
Okay. Oh, very good. And you did play professional football?
No, I didn't. I signed to play. Professional football.
Okay.
My last year at school, I received a scholarship to the university from them. I was promised a place on their training list, but I fled to a monastery instead.
You had the calling. Can we touch on that? Did you always have a calling growing up, or when did you know you had that call to the priesthood?
I was quite sick when I was young.
Okay.
I had throat trouble, a lot of operations. So as a young boy, I had thought I'd become a priest. I gave the idea away at secondary school, and I came. I did 2 years, year 12, which wasn't uncommon then. 20 or 30% of kids would do it. I did quite well my first year. I got a place in Melbourne law, but I was quite a successful schoolboy. But I was dissatisfied, and I thought, oh no, I'll go back and do physics and chemistry, so I can go and do medicine, so I can be. I had been thinking of doing law, as I mentioned, so that I could help people a bit more. I hated chemistry. I probably wasn't disciplined enough for the hard memory work. And during my last year at school, I had 3 deaths of significant people in a few months in the middle of the year. 2 uncles died, and I was quite keen on English literature. That was a subject then. It was a very good course, especially when compared with the courses that are offered today.
Yes, very different.
And the brother who... Nearly all my teachers were religious, brothers and nuns. Loreto nuns are Christian brothers, and I'm very grateful to them. And anyhow, my English teacher died, and so I had these 3 deaths, and it forced a reappraisal of what I was going to do. So, cut a long story short, I decided to enter the seminary, not because I wanted to become a priest, but because I felt compelled to do so. I felt that was what God wanted me to do. But I wasn't full of generosity or enthusiasm.
Oh, wow. So was that the following year since those deaths?
No, same year as the deaths.
Same year, okay.
Yeah,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
This was immediately outside of school, or you went...
I went after school into the seminary in 1960.
Okay.
And 95% of people going into the seminary did that in those days.
Interesting. And vocations back then would have been stronger than they have
immensely,
been?
Yeah. We had... there was an 8-year course, 3 years philosophy, a preliminary year of rhetoric, 4 years theology. In the Corpus Christi, it split in 1960 to Glen Waverley and Werribee, so I had 4 years at Werribee. There would have been about 200 students in the 2 places. There was 120 where we were, plus or minus. So now they've got about 50, which is better than it was 20 or 30 years ago.
Yes.
But the numbers and the religious orders were getting big numbers.
Yeah,
different days.
That's right. So when you were ordained to the priesthood, do you remember the year of your first?
Yes, I was ordained on the 16th of December 1966.
Okay.
In St. Peter's in Rome.
So, how special that would have been.
Yeah. It was.
And then what was your first appointment? Did you come back to a parish, or were you in Rome for a while?
No, I did 6 more months in Rome. And then I went to Oxford and did a doctorate in church history. But that was punctuated by 3 months in North Baltimore, Cathedral of Mary Our Queen.
Oh, wow, yes.
And it was there that I met a young fellow called George Weigel. So I've been a close family friend of the Weigels since 1967.
Yeah, he's a great writer, isn't he?
He's a great writer.
Great commentator.
Yes, he is.
And so you have quite a few friends in America, and we have a few viewers from the States and many of our partners. And you are definitely well known across the United States and around the world, of course, but lots of good friends there. But what was, a bit about you, how long were you a priest before you became auxiliary bishop?
I was ordained the end of 66 and I became an auxiliary bishop in 1987.
Okay. So, yeah, it's about 21 years.
21 years, that's right.
And was that in the city, Melbourne, or just outside?
At that stage, I was rector of the seminary, Corpus Christi College. I was rector from 85 to 87. Bob Santamaria thought that some people were keen to have me appointed auxiliary bishop because I was starting to have too much influence in the seminary on the students. But whatever about that, I was appointed auxiliary bishop in Melbourne and served as auxiliary for 9 years.
Okay.
It was a good apprenticeship.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you became Archbishop, right?
I did.
In Melbourne.
I did.
And
I had 2 extra diocesan roles when I was auxiliary bishop in Melbourne. I was chairman of Caritas, our overseas aid and development agency, which I'm very proud of. Does great work still. Did a lot of travelling through Asia and other parts. And also I became chairman of the committee that set up the Australian Catholic University. So Both of those were really worthwhile jobs to get your teeth into and took up a bit of time. So
that's our largest university now in Australia.
it's one of the largest Catholic universities in the world.
Yes, in the world.
Yeah,
oh, wow.
One of the largest. I don't know. Somebody said the University of St. Thomas in Manila is larger. I don't know whether... But it's got about 35,000 students, plus or minus.
Okay. It'll be coming up to a 30-year anniversary soon. They'll be getting close.
That would be right. That's correct.
Oh, well. I was about to ask some of the highlights of your time in Melbourne as Bishop and Archbishop. I guess what the church. What would you have summed up the time while you were there? The state of the church then, and then maybe by the time you moved to Sydney, looking back, did it change much? Did you see a growth in particular areas, or was there any?
Well, actually, we did. Given my time in the seminary, my time in Melbourne, by the time I became Archbishop, I had quite clear ideas about some of the things I wanted to do. And the first thing was to put together a new religious education, not just a syllabus, but texts for students, teachers and parents. And that eventually became Know, Worship and Love, the series which is still going, still being used, being adapted for the world of today as distinct from 25 years ago. Under the leadership of Anthony Cleary, he's an outstanding religious educator, helped by Haddad, who also does a very good job. So that was one area. The second area was the reform of the seminary.
Okay.
Because I've been seminary rector, I had a difficult time. The seminarians were reluctant to go to daily mass. The routine of prayer, the Rosary was prohibited as a public devotion.
Wow.
I think in my 2.5 years there I managed to get one celebration of benediction. So it was a different world and pretty stormy. The seminary staff didn't like the small changes I was bringing in. Daily mass, daily meditation, prayer of the church, Rosary. So they resigned, and perhaps to their mild surprise, I accepted their resignation. So
and started fresh and brought it back to what we understand to be authentic Catholicism.
And the vocations improved significantly, and have we don't have as many as we would like everywhere, but that's true in Melbourne too. But vocations have remained pretty good there since.
Fantastic. What do you?
The one other thing I'd like to mention that I did that I'm very proud of.
Yes.
Was to set up the Melbourne response.
Yes, I'm glad we can say that.
It was first. It dealt with, I think, some hundreds of complaints in my 5 years there.
Wow.
Quite a number of priests were stood down. We had close cooperation with the police. They publicly supported the creation of this procedure. Contrary to some false allegations by Mr. Ashton, we recommended something of the order of well over 100 people to the police. 80 or 90 went. There was no impeding people going to the police. Naturally, we stepped back if the police were investigating. And the other great injustice was the claim that there were 40 suicides. Carson's report, 40 suicides connected with clerical crimes, around Ballarat particularly. Yes. That was re-examined by the police themselves, and they could identify one person who suicided. Now, one person is one person too much.
Yes.
It's terrible, but there was nothing like the
exaggeration
the 40, and that was a police examination itself, second police investigation. So, and they sat on the news of this second investigation for years before they revealed to the public that the first the figures were quite false. So anyhow, so don't want to make exaggerated claims for the Melbourne response, but Peter O'Callaghan basically did a fine job, and it helped a lot of people. And interestingly, when I left Melbourne in 2001, quite a number of the people around town said to me, well, that's one thing you got right. Now, since then, it's been fiercely criticised. I'm not claiming it was perfect. It could have been reviewed, as the way they reviewed Towards Healing once or twice in the 30 years, but it was an honest and independent attempt to get at the truth, and it helped a lot of people.
And this is the point that there was nothing else like it at the time, was there? There was no formal response on this level.
No, and probably not around the world. And the Towards Healing, which I implemented faithfully in Sydney as Archbishop, came some months later. Now, the Towards Healing certainly did a lot of good work. We had an outstanding head of the Towards Healing for Sydney, and perhaps for New South Wales, certainly for Sydney, a man called Michael Salmon. Now, it's a terrible injustice to suggest that Michael worked ineffectively for 15 or 20 years until the time of the Royal Commission. He certainly didn't. He worked with great professionalism and competence and justice, and did a very, very good job.
Do you think, now I was going to talk about that a bit later, but I might as well ask it now. Now, thanks to the Royal Commission in Australia and sort of resurfacing all these old cases, which obviously brings all that hurt and pain back again, and it becomes real, very emotional. Has the Church done enough? Is there more the Church can do in this response to abuse?
Well, the Church has got to continue to contribute.
Yes.
I think I'm sure there are more things that can be done. I'm sure that they will be done. The Royal Commission did many, many good things. It enabled many gross crimes, and the fact that they were badly handled to be to be dealt with and helped. I mean, many people were helped. But it is not at all accurate to suggest that nothing was done. Gail Furness, who was the counsel assisting the Royal Commission, acknowledged that from the 90s, the number of offences in Catholic institutions collapsed radically. So in some, perhaps many dioceses, when you ask them, how many crimes of pedophilia have been committed in Catholic institutions this century? In many cases, the diocese is able to say none or very, very few.
Wow, well, there you go. So this has definitely had a positive impact now that it's working. It's heading in the right direction, and we're not hearing these cases that we heard of 40, 50 years ago.
We've been heading in the right direction in terms of preventing the crimes for 25 years.
Excellent.
In terms of provision of counselling, I think we've consistently done that for a long time. In terms of the measure of compensation, well, that's a different question, and the standards change, and the Church has become more generous, and I certainly welcome that.
Now, I'm interested to hear if there's any connection. I mean, this shouldn't happen. We look at it from a global scenario where one case is one too many. However, in your opinion, this is happening. We're seeing a loss of faith over the last generation, and as you were saying, in the 60s, the vocations were so high. You had religious orders teaching, and very interesting as those numbers were dropping, and much fewer vocations, and the loss of faith, generally speaking. Is there a connection between people's understand their consciousness or their faith and this type of these crimes? Do you think there's a moral connection?
Oh, undoubtedly there is, and the standing of the church has been damaged, and of course an immense amount of damage has been done to the victims.
Yes.
And we have to continue to try to remedy that. But it would be a great mistake to imagine that the fundamental challenge to faith comes from the pedophilia crisis.
That's right. Yeah.
The challenge to faith is much broader and deeper than that. I think there's a marvellous book by Margaret Eberstadt called Adam and Eve After the Pill. And she says that the creation of the contraceptive pill has had as big an effect on the world as the communist revolution in Russia in 1917. And I think this is true, and it's not just by decreasing the number of children, but of the way it has reformulated the rules that are followed each day by people outside marriage and before marriage with their sexual lives. So it's do people have fewer children because their faith has already weakened, or does it go the other way? Is their faith weakened when they decide perhaps to have no children or very, very few children?
Yes, very true.
Materialism, the economic pressures are pushing people away from faith. The sociological currents that helped ordinary people like myself to continue in the Christian tradition, a lot of those currents now are very hostile and moving people away.
Yeah, many more challenges now, and
yes, there are
distractions and noise, and there is a message out there in the world. It is about ourself, and we turn on ourself before anyone else. So it's almost like a selfishness in a sense, isn't it? The idea of love is not there anymore. As it should be anyway, and so the knock-on effect, as you describe, is so true.
Well, see, when I was a teenager, there was certainly too much alcohol in Ballarat, but there was no internet pornography, and there was no soft drugs, much less hard drugs problem, as far as I know. It was in Ballarat in the 50s. So with drugs and porn, these are enormous bring enormous changes, and as well as that, we've had a significant increase in marriage breakdown. Yes. Now that impacts on the kids.
Yes.
And so our school teachers, who so many ways do such a fine job, often also have to act as social workers, trying to heal and help the kids who are with them at school.
There is so much in this that we'll have to leave for another day, but what you're saying there is so dense that we need to recover so many things there, and the ability to rediscover our faith and connection there, as well as love and turning towards the increase now of addictions, and now we're seeing mental health grow more than ever. This loss of purpose, I think, out there.
Your mental health has got to, if there is more pornography, there's more drugs, no less alcohol, more marriage breakup, a weakening of the general communities, absence of fathers, men in the house. All these things obviously are not having good effects on our youngsters. I mean, many of the youngsters growing up today, or many, I think I could say, a lot of them, they're in a very hard situation.
Yes.
They're really doing it hard.
Yeah, it's important. We get the right messaging out there, and good role models as well.
Yes, and we give them a good basic education, certainly in religious education, but also in maths and English. It's all very well to have a high rhetoric for the poor. The best thing you can give to a kid from a battling family or a migrant kid is give him he and she a good mastery of English and a mastery of maths. And both of these things open up the way to the future.
Yes, absolutely. Can we continue on to Sydney now as Archbishop of Sydney? I remember I was very new to the church. I just had my reconversion, if you like, or coming back to faith a year earlier, and blessed to then welcome you into the city. And I noticed certainly over the years there's been some great projects that were implemented. What would be some of the highlights would you put out, in your time in Sydney as Archbishop?
Well, one of the things that I was able to do in Sydney was the reforming of the tertiary chaplaincy scene at the universities.
Yes.
A group of young people, Anthony McCarthy was one of them, came to me and said, why aren't we doing what the evangelical Anglicans are doing at Sydney University with teams of young lay people? And I thought, well, that's a good question. And we have followed that model, obviously priests, and we've got some Dominican nuns and the fraternists from Peru involved in it, doing great work. But the teams, there are more lay people than priests. And we have a very lively tertiary Catholic scene in the major universities in Sydney now. And it's a crucial time. Mm-hmm. And it was other people who suggested we follow this route to me, but I'm very, very glad that I did, and God has blessed us. Good marriages, but probably we've had in the 20 years something like 40 vocations. Wow. I'm not saying they grew up within it or were sparked by it, but who moved through the Sydney tertiary chaplaincies.
This is an important point for many people who probably don't even know this exists, but in secular universities, you've established these chaplaincies that would promote and evangelise on campus, but give a sense of belonging for many students and so many different spiritual activities that would happen on campus. And that's right. Now friendships have been born over the years, and it's quite remarkable, and what a model it could be across the country and across the world. Hopefully, dioceses around the world can take note of this, because it's quite effective.
One of the things I was blessed with both in Sydney and Melbourne, they weren't poor dioceses, and so I had money to do things.
It makes a big difference, yeah.
So it does make a difference, but the diocese has got to be prepared to put money into intangibles, into spiritual realities like a chaplaincy. So if you build a church or a school, you can very much see what you're getting for your money. If you're putting money into a theological institute or the Institute for Family Studies or chaplaincy services, you sometimes can't be quite sure what you're getting for your money. But I think the tertiary area should be a real priority for the church.
Yeah, that's a great... Why do you say that? Is it the age of the students? Is that a crucial time for someone?
Well, I think it is. I remember saying to one experienced Catholic priest chaplain, I said, one of the troubles with the university chaplaincy, you've only got them for 3 or 4 years and then they're gone. And this chaplain said, no. once you catch them at university, you've generally got them for life.
Wow.
They no longer stay after university, or most of them don't. They go off into careers and married life. But most of them hang on to the choices they made as young adults.
Yes, yeah, that's very valuable. You did become Cardinal as Archbishop of Sydney. This is before going to Rome, so you did remain. You were a Cardinal for quite a few years.
Yes.
Was there, for those who may not know the difference, as a Cardinal, yes, you can vote for the Pope, but what other things does a Cardinal do, or what is different for an Archbishop when you become a Cardinal? Are there other roles that you take on?
Often, yeah, you're appointed to some of the governing groups in Rome. You're actually and technically an advisor to the Pope. Every cardinal has a connection with the Roman Church, because as a cardinal of the Church of Rome, appointed by the Pope. So
was it Pope John Paul II at the time, or Pope?
Yeah, no,
Yes.
he appointed Pope
Yes.
John Paul II appointed me cardinal. I'm a very explicit and grateful John Paul the Great man.
Saint John Paul the Great, which
That's
is amazing.
correct.
And then Pope Benedict was Pope, and then Pope Francis and you were then called to Rome.
Yes, I was the prefect of the Secretariat for the Economy. The Vatican finances have been bedeviled by scandals and a measure of incompetence for at least 40 years now.
Wow.
And so...
Many people would probably have no idea about it, or
in some ways that's a bit better. There's a discreet veil of silence pulled over some of it.
But we know you did some cleaning up in there, and it looks like it's in much better shape as far as finances are concerned.
I think yes, I think they're heading in the right direction.
Yes.
I think it is in better shape. They're running a deficit every year, and that's been radically exacerbated by the COVID crisis.
Oh, yeah.
So the Vatican is under very real financial pressure, and just what they will do to turn that around, remains to be seen.
It might be a great opportunity to answer the common question you hear out there. Oh, the church is this huge institution with so much money, and it should be doing more for the poor and things like that. What do you say to that? I mean, it's a common thing that's said, and many people have a misinterpretation of how the church, why it spends so much money on certain buildings or architecture, or how do we respond to people who feel that it needs to sell everything and just become a poor church?
There's a number of things that can be said.
Yes.
And the first of these is that we're Christians and we believe that God is of first importance, so that the creation of beautiful churches, houses of worship to glorify God is, I'm tempted to say, one of the first priorities of the Catholic Church. Now we also do an enormous amount for the poor. Through our Catholic care, that's one of the best kept secrets, the work our social service agencies do, and it's wonderful work. Our schools, education, Matt Talbot is homes for people on the streets. I remember somebody wrote a hostile letter to me at the cathedral, alleging that I was sleeping in silk sheets, and he said to me, you're doing nothing for the poor. What are you doing for the poor around the cathedral? And so I was a little bit blunt. That's not my style, but I wrote back, and I didn't tell him that I wasn't sleeping in silk sheets, which I certainly wasn't. But I said, well, there are about 800 beds in this area around the cathedral for homeless people. And I think something like half of them are provided by Catholic agencies. I said certainly a couple of times a week at least, or 2 different agencies come in some nights a week to near the cathedral to feed people of an evening.
Which is still going today, yes.
Yeah, and I said, we were still doing that. So I finished up by saying, I never heard from him again, what does your mob do?
Yeah.
What do they provide for whoever he represents for the battlers? So we could do more and we should do more. I mean, Caritas does an enormous amount overseas. And that's one of the best developments in the Church since the Second Vatican Council. There was no Australian Catholic relief or Caritas before the Second Vatican Council.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, it's said that the Church as a whole does feed, house and shelter more people, clothe more people than any other institution in the world, if you were to add it all up, combined.
That might very well be... well, look at all our St Vincent de Paul. I mean, most parishes in Sydney have a St Vincent de Paul group. We've got the Vinnie's shops.
Yes.
These are real avenues of service to people.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, just in recent times, Your Eminence, we know you had, a lot of difficulty just in this whole case that's hit headlines, and praise be to God, you've been acquitted, but you were in jail for 404 days, I understand.
Yes. I never counted them, but people say once or twice they say 405. I've never checked.
You knew, first of all, it wasn't the first time you've been accused. You've been accused in the past, but in your own self what you've done in your life as far as helping and helping people heal. But the time, can you tell us a little bit about the time in jail, and you just mentally, spiritually, what were you going through?
Well, it wasn't a fun time.
No.
But it wasn't the worst of times, and in comparison, I mean, I'd read stories about the Gulag and the Soviets and the Nazi concentration camps and Cardinal Twans, then Thomas More and John Fisher, Father Cizak in the States. Well, all of them had it much, much harder than I did. I mean, I wasn't at the Ritz or the Hilton, but I had 3 meals a day. I had a bed with a firm base and a mattress. I had a hot shower. I also had a kettle and a television set. So.
In comparison to those other characters, you're counting your blessings.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the warders, not absolutely everyone, but overwhelmingly they were decent and human. When they were the only people you'd see, and when they'd bring you the meals or this or that, they would just talk casually and humanly, and that was a very big thing. There's a lot of goodness and a lot of kindness in jail. There's a lot of other stuff too, but a lot of humanity. You
did talk about your prayer life, and you described it as a long retreat in a sense. What do you mean by that?
Well, you had an opportunity for prayer, to do a bit of spiritual reading, to do study, do a bit of writing. I actually one week did what I described as a formal retreat, but each day was a bit like the program you would follow on a traditional retreat. I couldn't, except that I couldn't go to Mass, or there was no benediction or anything like that. Oh. But I was able to, I had always had my breviary, even from the first night. They allowed me to have that. I had a Bible, I had They took my rosary off me, but issued a prison rosary.
Is it any different?
Yeah, one wasn't made of metal. It was
Okay.
made of cloth. So with the daily routine of prayer, all that was possible.
We are actually preparing for a spiritual rosary pilgrimage virtually. In one word, what would you say the power of the rosary for you during this time? What would you describe this prayer, the significance of the prayer?
Well, see, it's a very popular. It's easy to pray the rosary. It gives you something to do with your hands. It's like a cigarette. It's routine. It's repetitive. It's conducive to meditation on the mysteries. It's a good prayer when you're under pressure, so when you're in jail. It's no surprise that a lot of people, when they're in hospital or somebody's dying, will say the rosary. It's an easy, repetitive, soothing prayer, so I endorse it enthusiastically, very highly.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, your time, how long has it been now since you've been out of jail? You worked
since Holy Week, anyway.
Holy Week, okay. And how have you been? How's life and how are you
took
doing?
Took a bit of getting used to into a new way of life, but it's very pleasant being free.
Absolutely, absolutely. Some final thoughts. Now you've gone through a lot in your life, and you've seen all sorts of on many levels of suffering, of you name it, positive, negative, corruption, if you want to call it, or all sorts of things. We are in an increasingly secular world, very hostile to the Christian faith, more so than we've seen the media and the like. What would be a message for the Catholic viewers and those who are really confused now? How do they live out their faith in a society that really is not so friendly to the message of the gospel these days? What would be some tips?
Well, I sometimes say, look, living the Catholic message, the Christian message, is a bit like losing weight.
Okay. Please explain.
Well, it's very simple. To lose weight, I mean, I'm putting on weight slowly now, but to lose weight, you eat less and exercise more. It's very clear what you've got to do. And so it is with the Christian life. You have to believe in the one true God, in Jesus, his Son. You have to pray, repent of your sins. They're just these ordinary, everyday, basic things that have been handed down to us. And those simple practices and truths work. And you can do that whether you're in the Sahara or the Antarctic or in Catholic Europe in the 13th century or an increasingly unbelieving Australia in the 21st century. But the other thing is that we shouldn't conclude that because there's a bit more hostility, it'll necessarily be bad for us.
Okay.
It can... I mean, I had a number of people that write to me who hadn't been practicing their religion but were so upset by the injustice of what happened to me that they resumed their practice of the faith. So the effect of things on people is unpredictable. And just because there's a bit of opposition or hostility doesn't mean to say it's going to necessarily damage us or push people away. It can be also an opportunity for people to wake up and say, yes, well, now I realise what's at stake. I'm going to take a stand.
Yeah, fantastic. So don't give up out there. Don't give up.
No, absolutely.
There is hope, and
it works.
Yes, absolutely.
Jesus' message works.
Well, thank you for not giving up and staying the course and still doing that till today. And please know of our prayers. We're praying for you and for our church as well. And so in the 21st century, may our church continue to bring the gospel to the world and good news, and may it bring hope to all those suffering out there. And please know that don't judge. the church by just one or two individuals. Give it a shot. You are part of the church if you want to join.
That's right.
And make a difference as the body of Christ.
I mean, there are plenty of sinners in the church, plenty of sin, we're all sinners. But we preach Christ crucified and risen.
Yes.
And it helps if our lives can be faithful to those Christian teachings. But what we preach is Christ as the Son of God. And that's the crucial issue, is whether his message is true and efficacious. And of course, in faith, we say yes to both of those.
I want to thank you very much for your time, Your Eminence, and please pray for us as well at Parousia and all those watching.
Good. No, it's important what you're doing, and stick at it.
Will do.
Thanks,
You've
Charbel.
always encouraged over the years, so thank you. God bless you.
Good.
That's another Parousia podcast, a very special one, Cardinal George Pell. Please pray for him, pray for our church, and let's pray for our world. So God bless you, and until next time, take care.